Hello, welcome to my channel, another bibliophile reads. My name is Greg, and I am doing the Don't You Forget About Me tag, created by Julian at Bookworm Adventure Girl. This is a weaponized tag from Brian at Bookish. Brian created a video where he talked about 5 books that he could not remember reading, even though he knew he had read them. So Julian changed it up a little bit, and she wants to talk about books not only that you know you've read and can't remember, but books that you don't ever want to forget having read. It only has 4 prompts, and then I tagged, prompt to tag other people, and you can include as many books in these prompts as you want. There's no rules. So the first prompt is clean slates, books you've read that you don't remember anything about. My first one is The Night Has Died by Cees. Noteboom. This is a novel translated from the Dutch, and it is the first entry in my databases of books that I have been reading since December of 1990. So I know I read this book in 1990 because it is the first book in my database. And I don't remember much. I just remember the first sentence in translation. His devastated life. That's all I remember. And I still have it on my shelf, just waiting to be reread or not reread. The second book I don't remember reading is Fear by Ronald Kelly. This is a 1980s horror novel. I recently saw someone reviewing this book. Not really recently, it was back probably September or so, maybe October. Someone was reviewing this book and said it was a great 80s horror novel. It was. So I looked it up on Amazon, on the Kindle, and it was like on a $1.99 sale. And I said, yep, I'm buying that book. Sounds great. So when I was going over my database for books that I forgot about reading, lo and behold, in the year 2000, I read Fear by Ronald Kelly. I don't even recall reading this one, but there it is in my database. I know I read it. And now I'm thinking, did I actually read this in the 80s when it first came out and forgot about reading it the first time? And this will be the third time I get around to reading it if I ever pick up that Kindle version, which I kind of want to. Another book that I totally forget reading is The Bone People by Keri, Hulme. I read it in 2010. I believe this was a Booker Prize winner. It is set in New Zealand. It is one of the few novels that I've ever read that's set in New Zealand. And here you just insert the crickets, because I don't remember a darn thing about reading this book. I eventually unhauled it when I was moving, so I can't even pick up a copy and say anything more about it other than it's a really famous book from New Zealand that I have read and I don't remember a darn thing about. Next prompt, Genie's Lamp, books you wish you could forget. My Brilliant Life by Aaron Kim. I read this about 2 years ago for the BookTube Prize in translation. It is the story of a young Korean boy with a very devastating illness, pareidolia, something like that. It's premature aging. So when you're born, you just start aging right away, and by the time you reach your teenage years, you're looking like a 95-year-old man. So it's a very sad story. Can I add sad a few more times? It's very Hallmarky, and that's why I really did not like it. There is one passage in that book, and I'm going to paraphrase because I'm not going to get it exactly, where the young boy with the disease is thinking about his parents, because the parents are the main people he interacts with his life. And the phrase is, how do you know what every great kid has? Great parents. Okay, I can understand how parents of children are really going to dig something like that. But, for me, being, mid-50s and childless, it just fell completely flat. And I wish I could forget that book. The next book I wish I could forget is a perennial favorite for some people, and that is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I know this book is extremely popular. I know it's a hugely popular movie, but it is just a load of dung. There are some scenes in that book that had me rolling my eyes, and just I was incredulous. Like, how could you write such a stupid scene? Now, the problem is the stupid scene that I'm going to mention, I've seen on someone else's video saying it's their favorite scene in the whole series. And the scene is just set up, the idea is that there's a dystopian government and children are made to fight each other, and you have a lottery to see which children fight. And there's a big sister named Katniss, and her little sister gets picked. She's going to have to go die. So even before she finishes, Katniss decides, I volunteer to go in her place. Okay, I had a big brother. I know my big brother in the same situation who goes, don't be the first to get killed. I would be the same. I would say to younger sibling, don't be the first to get killed. I would never volunteer. So I guess this is for the demographic that has really strong family values and you really love your siblings. But I just absolutely detested that book. And the dystopian government in that book is just the most pathetic dystopian government that I have ever read about. You'd have to read the book on how many times they fail. Essentially, they get brought down by a teenage girl. Not an impressive dystopian future. The next one I really don't want to forget, or I do want to forget, is Maelstrom by Michael MacConnell. This is a thriller. It starts off with a young FBI agent who's a woman, and she's the daughter of another famous FBI agent. And they had this problem. All these potential serial killers are being killed. So you have a serial killer who has managed to hack in to the FBI computer system, solve all the crimes that the FBI agents couldn't solve, and kill them. And not only that is this serial killer super duper pooper smart, he's incredibly rich. He can afford to hire black market helicopter gunships to defend himself. So you have this poor little female FBI agent having to dodge the machine guns from helicopter gunships to get to the serial killer at the end of the book. I think this author just watched way too many stupid movies, and it's a horrible, horrible thriller. Forgotten Gems. Books you think need more love. The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind by Julian Jaynes. Yes, that title is a mouthful. And Julian Jaynes is a psychologist who his theory is almost certainly incorrect, but his theory was that human consciousness developed a lot later in the human mind than people think. That early civilizations had functioning civilizations without full human consciousness. And what happens is to these people in this pre-consciousness state is that they had auditory hallucinations, and where they heard voices in their head telling them what to do in certain situations. And it's like you see grass rustle in the leaves, you hear a voice saying, there's a tiger, run. Now, a normal conscious man would say, rustling of the leaves could be a tiger. I better run. But his idea is that they heard auditory hallucinations. And he gave some examples in literature of pre-conscious writing and post-conscious writing. Now, that itself is very highly controversial. And one of the best examples is Homer. He says the Iliad was written by a pre-conscious bardic singer, and the Odyssey was written by a post-conscious bardic singer. Now that just goes to show that Homer is not really the same author, that they are two different authors, but they showed the crossover between post-consciousness and pre-consciousness. He even gives examples from the Bible Amos was an example of pre-consciousness writing, where people heard the voice of God speaking to them a lot and telling them what to do. In Ecclesiastes, you don't get that. You get the ruminations on the human condition. Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. That type of thinking. It's an interesting read. I don't buy his premise. I think it's wrong, but it's a really great book. A science fiction book by the famous Robert Silverberg, The Book of Skulls. A Jewish student in New York City discovers an ancient tome describing a cult that can grant immortality. But you have to apply to this cult in groups of 4, and only 2 people will be accepted into the cult. And that's all I'm going to give. But the book is narrated by 4 different characters, alternating. Now, the big thing is, I said Sir Robert Silverberg was a science fiction author. This book is published as science fiction. But after you read it, my question to people who dare is the book science fiction? That's what makes it a really fascinating read, and why I think more people should be reading this book. Another book that people really should be reading that I don't hear a lot of people talking about is 4321 by Paul Auster. It is the story of a Jewish boy growing up in New York City, whose father has a very tragic accident. The father owns a warehouse, and the father employs his brother, who's a ne'er-do-well. And then you start learning that this book is told in 4 different alternating viewpoints from the same character. But each viewpoint has a different outcome from this tragic warehouse fire. In one storyline, the father dies in the fire. In one storyline, the father prevents the fire from ever being set. In another storyline, the father has to protect his brother because the brother set the fire. In the last storyline, the father denounces his brother as the fire setter. So it sets off totally different sorts of life changes for this young boy. And this boy does not live through all 4 timelines. Really great book. I wish more people would pick this up. Even though this is a story of alternating realities, this is not a science fiction book. Next prompt. Forget-me-nots. Books you will always remember. Forget-me-nots. Books you will always remember. Geek Love by Katherine Dunn. This is the story of a traveling circus, or should I say carnival show, where the parents who own this circus or traveling carnival show decide to create their own freakish children, with the mother ingesting all sorts of horrid substances to help induce birth defects in children. You have Artie, the flipper boy, who becomes a cult leader of one of the most disgusting cults you will ever read about. You have Olympia, the albino dwarf, the narrator of the story. And then you have the Siamese twins, Effie and Elegy. Effie and Elegy? I can't quite remember their names. And then you have Chick, the prize of all the machinations of the parents to get a freakish child. Really great book. Very freakish in more ways than one. Another book I will never forget is Jude the Obscure. Jude Fowley was growing up in rural England in the 19th century. He wanted to be more than just a peasant. He wanted to go study Greek and Latin and be an intellectual. That was not in his cards. His fate was elsewhere. And fate is very important in a Thomas Hardy novel. And his life takes some quite unusual turns. And this is the novel that made Thomas Hardy stop writing fiction, because it was considered really obscene and scandalous. You see, Jude Foley took up with the wrong sort of woman. And then that wrong sort of woman lighted out for Australia. So what did Jude Foley do? He didn't get divorced. He just hooked up with another woman. And they weren't married. And they had kids. And take it from there. I think Jude the Obscure is just a magnificent novel. I saw a lot of myself in Jude, in aspiring to be more than what I was, but never quite getting there. Although my fate didn't turn out as badly as Jude's. And lastly, I'm going to actually, it's more than one book, but I'm doing The Years of Lyndon Johnson by Robert A. Caro. This is currently 4 volumes in the biography of Lyndon Baines Johnson. There is a 5th book that Caro is currently working on. And he's old, and I hope he finishes this. The first book in this quartet was The Path to Power, originally published in 1982. You then have The Means of Ascent in 1990, Master of the Senate in 2002, and The Passage of Power in 2012. So he's about due for that, it's 5 volumes, not 4 volumes. And I'm really looking forward to that book comes out because he's just such a magnificent writer. He is incredibly detailed in his writing. You will get detail overload, but he puts that detail overload for a very good purpose because he has a point to prove. As I say, in the second book, The Path to Power, there is a scene where they're counting election returns. You would think that would be dull as dirty dishwater, but it's some of the most exciting writing I have ever read because unlike some current elections, Lyndon Baines Johnson probably put some shenanigans into that vote count to get him elected to Senate. Such a great group of books. I'm counting it as one book because really it's one super long biography that's going to be 5 volumes long. And that is all the prompts. And now, just to tag some people, let's do Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics, MJ at Reading This Life, Pat at Book Chat with Pat, and Cliff at Cliff's Dark Gems. You don't have to do this tag. You can put any type of book you want to in this tag. It's not limited to a genre. So anything that you like and you want to remember or forget. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and keep on reading.